Auto layout is the best feature you'll ever use in any design software, and today you're gonna learn how to use it. So, what is auto layout for? Auto layout is a feature from Figma that lets you control layout using the properties panel. This means you can design pixel-perfect layouts at a blazing fast speed. I'm gonna walk you through auto layout features, and we're gonna be creating 3 elements so you can hit the ground running after this video or during this video, whatever vibes with you. Okay, so we are gonna be creating these 3 elements: a button, a card, and a section. And each element will compound off of each other so you can see how auto layout can create more and more complex elements. Let's start with the button. So to use auto layout, you need to be using a frame. So to start, I'm going to create a frame here. You can do this by using the shortcut F or selecting the frame tool on the top bar. Since I know how I want this button to look, I'm going to set it up beforehand. So I'm going to activate auto layout by pressing Shift A. You can also select auto layout from the properties panel. Since I want this button to be able to receive icons in the future, I will select it to stack horizontally. I will leave the spacing at 8 because it seems enough. I will select the elements to align to the center. And now I'm gonna adjust the spacing or the padding. So horizontally, I'm gonna set up to 24 and vertically to 16. If you want, you can also just click here and type the values that you want. Now let's style the button. First, I'm gonna name the frame so I know what I'm designing. I'm gonna select a background color. There we go. I want these corners to be rounded. And finally, let's add a subtle drop shadow here. Okay, now that our button is set up, we can add text and icons. So I'm gonna use the text tool by pressing T. And I'm gonna add the text. You can see that the button automatically adjusts, and you can tweak it if necessary, no problem. Alright, now let's move to a little more complicated component. We're gonna recreate this card using some auto layout techniques, which is auto layout nesting. So we are gonna nest an auto layout frame inside another auto layout frame. So let's get started. First, let's create a frame, shortcut F or frame tool on the top bar. I'm gonna activate auto layout using the Shift A shortcut. I'm gonna name this a card, and let's style it. So I'm gonna set the width to fixed. This means that the width will not change, and I'm gonna set this to 240 pixels. I can leave the height as hug, so the card will stretch with the elements inside it. I'm gonna select the rounded corner to 24 pixels. And I'm gonna leave clip content checked. And now moving to the auto layout properties. I want things to stack vertically, so the heading and the description are below the image. And I'm gonna remove the spacing. Why I'm gonna remove the spacing? Because as you can see, the image bleeds to the edge of the card, so I want to recreate this effect. And the alignment on the top left looks good. So first, I'm gonna select the frame tool again, and I'm gonna click in the card to place a frame inside it. And just so we don't get lost, let's rename this to image container. I always like to keep my files tidy. And I'm gonna use the handle to drag it all the way to the edge. I'm gonna leave the width as fixed, but I can also change it to fill container. So if I decide to stretch this card, it's gonna stretch with it, so no problem there. And I'm gonna set the height to 320, so 320 pixels. Now let's place an image here. I have prepared one here, so I'm gonna copy it. And on the layers panel, I'm gonna select directly the frame, and I'm gonna paste it. Alright, let's resize the image. Looking good. Now for the tweak. This image container doesn't need to be an auto layout frame, because I'm not gonna place anything inside it, so I'm just gonna leave it there. To make it easy on us, I'm gonna hit Ctrl D or Command D if you're on a Mac to duplicate this frame inside the card, and I'm gonna use this second frame to place the text that I have there. So I'm gonna rename it to copy. I'm gonna delete the image because we don't need it, and I'm gonna activate auto layout by hitting Shift A. Now on the copy, I'm gonna set up the spacing, so I want this to be a little wider. We don't need the vertical spacing, or actually we do, but not the top one. So here's the trick. If you want to set the top spacing and the bottom spacing, or the left and right, you can do with a comma. So I'm gonna set 0,16. So the top spacing is gonna be 0 and the bottom spacing is gonna be 16. Why do I do that? Because I want to control this spacing using the gap here. So I'm gonna leave it at 8 pixels. Now inside the copy, I'm gonna place the text. So we're gonna have a heading that's a tad too big. There we go. Now I'm gonna duplicate this heading, and this is gonna be a paragraph. And there we go. We have a card and the image stretches all the way. We can tweak it a little bit so it looks better. So I'm gonna double check image container is fill and the copy is fill. So as you can see, I'm gonna stretch this and everything is gonna stretch with it. So I'll leave it at 320. I'm just gonna adjust the image here. And there we go. We have our card. Alright, so now let's move to our last component. We're gonna be combining the other two components we created into a more complex one, a website section. Let's start by creating a frame and activating auto layout. Now I'm gonna set up this frame to be like this. First, I'm gonna name it as a section. I'm gonna set the width to fixed. I want it to have 832 pixels, which is a default web width. And I'm gonna leave the height to hug because I want the section to stretch with the elements inside it. Stacking vertically is okay. I'm gonna adjust the spacing to 24 pixels because I want some breathing room. I'm gonna adjust the horizontal padding to 32 pixels and the vertical padding to 64 pixels. I always like to use multiples of 8 to align with the 8 pixels grid. With grid systems in general, it's easier. Okay, so let's take a look at our component. We have a set of cards here and a button. So let's start with the set of cards. Inside the section, I'm gonna place a frame, shortcut F, and I'm gonna name it row. If you want, you can describe it a little more like row cards, but that's good enough. So let's activate auto layout in it. I'm gonna set the width to fill container. I'm gonna select horizontal layouts and I'm gonna activate wrapping, so the elements wrap to another line. I'm gonna adjust the spacing to 16 pixels, and we don't need horizontal or vertical padding because we are gonna be controlling the spacing through the section gap and padding here. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this card we created and I'm gonna paste it inside the section. Now let's see if our wrapping is working. I'm gonna select this card frame and I'm gonna duplicate it by using Ctrl D or Command D if you're on a Mac. There you go. As you can see, as the card reaches the end of the row, it automatically wraps into another line. But we want 3 cards in a row, so let's see how we can do that. Let's set a fixed width to each of the cards until they can fit into a line. All right, there we go. I think 240 pixels is okay. I do think the image is a little bit too tall, so I'm gonna bring that down just so it looks nicer. There we go. Now, I do think this is missing a little drop shadow, so I'm gonna add this here. And as you can see, this drop shadow is getting cropped. This happens because this frame has clip content selected, so I'm gonna deselect it And now we can see the shadow perfectly. Let's duplicate this a little more so it wraps rows, and there we have it, the first part of our section. Now, to finish it up, we're gonna add a bottom, and we want it centered to the middle. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna select the section, and I'm gonna place a frame inside it. Since we are using auto layout, I could just press the down arrow to move it below the cards. I'm gonna activate auto layout, and I'm gonna call it button wrapper. I'm gonna set the width to fill container, and I'm gonna align it to the middle because we want the bottom to be centered. The layout, vertical, horizontal, doesn't really matter here, neither does the gap. I'm just gonna remove the spacing as we don't need it. Now I'm gonna copy the bottom and I'm gonna paste it here. And there we go. We have a website section with a few cards and a button. Alright, there you have it. A guide to auto layout in 2023. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. See you next time.